So in 2012, 3 years ago, there was a strange gathering that was organised by the Council of Europe that, who knows how they did this, maybe it was the intelligence services, but they brought together a lot of young people because they were worried about the implications of high youth unemployment throughout Europe and the potential for this to create a politically unstable situation. And they managed to bring together not just young people, but a very diverse, strange mix of people, which ranged from policymakers, hackers, people that were very much involved in different movements that were taking place in Europe at the time. So in that policy context, we thought maybe we could design something that the Council of Europe or other cities might like, that might allow us to expand, but potentially most importantly, to create a kind of foundational layer that would create autonomy for the sorts of values that were found in movements like Occupy, hackerspaces, etc. And so the basic concept for the unMonastery is there are a large number of empty properties throughout Europe, 11 million, enough to house the homeless 3 times over. That might not be true right now given the refugee crisis. Austerity, so the rollback of state service provision as the result of a shrinking state, and high youth unemployment. So the basic concept was to take these 3 things and put them together in order to form some kind of solution at a local scale. So the idea was to invite people into empty properties, to revitalize those properties, and to work in collaboration with the local community in that area to provide services that would make sense to that specific geography. And the desire is to build a network of these spaces. So if you imagine, and the network thing is quite important, because one unMonastery on its own, whilst maybe quite effective and a nice thing to have in your town, if you have 20 who are sharing skills online and are able to call for specific skills to address difficult situations, then you have a very interesting fluid network of skilled individuals. Now, it's not particularly easy to live and work together, and that's probably why hackerspaces remain a kind of hobby club. So we thought that it would be interesting to draw on monastic tradition, given that for 15 centuries this has been a relatively stable way in which to cohabit. It's probably important at this point to say that unMonastery, the un in unMonastery means no god, no hierarchy, no patriarchy. Okay, so the prototype. So we actually did this, we didn't just think about it. Somehow, the city of Matera in southern Italy liked what we were proposing. So I mean, we put a website online, we said this is our vision, and we had some connections to the city, and they said, we like the sound of this, would you like to come and do it here? And there was a specific reason for that, because the city of Matera was trying to build from a bottom-up position their bid for European capital of culture on principles of a kind of open future. And this kind of flies in the face of the history of the European capital of culture, which for the most part was predicated on imported spectacle. What they were interested in was a citizen participation process. They were interested in open sourcing their existing data and processes, and they were interested particularly in this kind of idea of an ancient future, of the knowledge that may have potentially been lost in the last 100 years of development. Matera is a particularly interesting case in this respect because up until the 60s or the 70s, it was one of the longest inhabited, constantly inhabited places on the earth. Maybe I'll just finish on what we did. Okay, so when we were in Matera and we ran the prototype, there were a couple of different projects that we did. We ran a series of public meetings with citizens in the city to kind of try and identify challenges. And now this is something that we've kind of thrown out as a process that doesn't really work, but it did lead to a number of interesting projects. So one of the issues was there was no intergenerational space in the city. So we tried to establish a series of open coding workshops, one of which is called Coder Dojo. It's a way of teaching kids to program or using games. And in October of last year, we ran a session where we taught 1,000 children to code in a school. We ran a project to map all of the different transport routes in the city and make that data freely available and lobby the local government or local municipality to release as much data as possible about finances, etc. We did another project where we tried to develop a new kind of energy generation that draws on high altitude winds called Kaida wind. And then I just skip all those other bits and then just say where we are at the moment. So where we are at the moment is we moved to Athens at the beginning of this year, partly because of the situation in terms of the collapse of the European project, and we felt like that was an important place to be, but also we foresaw that there was going to be an unfolding humanitarian crisis. And the project has become quite stretched and difficult because so many people who are involved in unMonastery are on the ground trying to work in that situation. But quite unexpectedly in the last month or so, we've had a number of people come forward that want to start unMonasteries in different cities and places in the world, and so we are working with them towards that. Thank you.